I think that it's 7 o'clock and we have a quorum.
Yes.
So do you want to do your opening pitch, Simon?
Yeah, so I will go ahead and defer to Chair O'Connell to call to order the meeting.
Okay, we're calling to order. I like to do a little roster thing, just calling the roll. And I've got my list of everybody in alphabetical order somewhere in this pile of papers. There it is in alphabetical order. So I will call you alphabetically by last name and ask to state that you're here. Member Brinkerhoff.
Here.
Carney is Bill
Here.
Gilliland.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Corhan.
Here.
McCallum.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Nadja Reese is not here, but hopefully may show up. O'Connell, I'm here. And Silva Khan
Here.
and Smith.
I was gonna say. Roger, you're
Nope,
silent.
I said here, I guess trigger isn't fast enough.
Okay,
So I do want to add this meeting is being held virtually and viewers are welcome to provide public comment online or by telephone at 669-900-9128. And the meeting ID is 816-4120-8163. If you're watching the meeting on Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please select the participants icon and select raise hand. If you are participating by telephone and wish to provide public comments, please press *9 when the chair opens a public comment period. When it is your time to speak, you will hear a notification that you've been unmuted and you have 2 minutes to speak. We currently do not have any participants or attendees at the meeting.
okay, the first order of business is approval of the October 1 meeting notes. Any comments?
There's one edit that I missed, which is it should say approval of August 6th meeting notes.
Oh, right. It says July.
All right, do I hear a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Next item is approval of the inclusionary housing letter, which was drafted up by the joint work of a couple of members. It's in your package. If there is anybody who has not seen it, I can read it, but is there anybody who wants me to read it, or otherwise has everybody had a chance to review it?
Yes.
I don't hear anybody objecting or at a loss. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve.
Second.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? The third item is public comment on non-agenda items, which, because there's no members of the public present, we pass. And we're on to the main order of business. I think everybody probably knows Joanne Webster, the CEO of the Chamber. And this is, as I kind of commented earlier, a little different format than our usual meeting. We usually have a fairly rigidly defined subject matter that our presenters handle. In this case, there's nobody better positioned than Joanne Webster to tell us how the current COVID crisis is affecting the business community and outlook for business, and any other subject that she wants to touch on. So with that, I will yield the chair to Joanne Webster and ask her to give a presentation. And Joanne, you can tell us how you want to handle this. At what point you want to open it up for comments or questions, and I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Bill. Hang on one second. I'm going to get my crystal ball so that we can kind of all look into that crystal ball and figure out what's going on. Now, that's just a little joke and levity for this evening. Thank you so much for the invitation. I know most of you. I don't know all of you, so I'll give you a very quick background on myself. Those of you who have known me for many years, I apologize for the repeat. But I have been working and serving the city of San Rafael for 3 decades. I do live in Fairfax, but I absolutely love the city of San Rafael. That's what makes my job so great. My husband and I started a business here in 1988, a little ice cream and sandwich shop on 4th Street. We owned and operated that for 23 years before selling it in 2011. Prior to the sale of this store, I was contracted by the city of San Rafael in 2000 to manage the business improvement district, so the downtown area. That's how I got to know the city really well. I got to know Joe's mom really, really well, and working in the redevelopment agency, and those were some great years. In 2011, I was hired by the Chamber as their Director of Marketing and Community Promotion. My husband got a teaching credential at Dominican and has been a history teacher for a few years, but he's currently now at Tam High in Mill Valley. And in 2014, I was promoted to the CEO position at the Chamber. The San Rafael Chamber is the largest chamber in the county. We are the most influential chamber. We have nearly 600 members, representing 26,000 employees across 25 different industry sectors. And we try to influence policy decision makers on the impact of their decisions through the lens of the business community. So tonight I want to talk about 3 areas: the impact of COVID, as you had said, Bill, some of the survival strategies, sort of a recap of what's been done so far, the work that I've been doing on the road to recovery. So I am part of a group called Keep Marin Working, which is a coalition of the largest business organizations in the county, including the San Rafael and Novato Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, the Marin Builders Association, the Marin Realtors Association, and the Marin Economic Forum. So we put together an 11-point framework, which we have been out there communicating, put it in front of the councils and mayors and all the cities, and put it in front of the supervisors to try to get them to adopt it. Haven't had success on that yet, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So I want to talk about the 11-point framework and then talk about housing and how the Chamber has made housing a huge priority. I know that's of interest to this group. So I think for tonight, I want it to be really informal. This is just through the lens of the Chamber. Many of you, thank you for your service to the Chamber and to past board chairs. I really appreciate it. So I'm open. You want a question, just jump in, interrupt me. I'm happy to answer it. So the impact that you've all read about small businesses is huge. But what I want to address today is the impact that I feel it's had on the community at large. So it was pretty, we realized right away that the county had no disaster preparedness plan. The county had no emergency plan. We hadn't gone through a fire like Sonoma. So we were just kind of all scrambling. It really magnified the inequities in our community, as you all know. Disproportionately, our minority-owned businesses and our minority community was really impacted. And it really looked at acceleration of anything that was going to be automated. So if you were already a business where your model was being impacted by competition of online sales, you really needed to change your business model. So recap to date, we did a small disaster relief grant program you probably read about. We was able to give out $250,000 to 65 businesses. There was a scramble for PPP loans. A number of businesses were able to secure those loans. There was a lot of technical assistance behind those loans. Then we launched into reopening guidelines. The county formed a task force called Marin Recovers, which the chamber has been very involved in, and I know the city of San Rafael as well. We created the guidelines for reopening. Then we started to look at repurposing outdoor space, and again, the city was on the forefront of that. And then it seemed like we kind of hit this lull. The Dine Under the Lights program was really great. A lot of other cities and towns were doing that. Novato, Sausalito, it was very successful. But then we kind of ran into being stuck in tier, I think we were in tier red for a long time. And I just read tonight, we've been in orange tier for enough weeks. If we stay in that orange tier for another 2 weeks, we'll be able to have even lesser restrictions. However, in a meeting today with Dr. Willis, he cautioned against being relaxed about our protocols and really thinking that that the county might make some adjustments on that. So as you might know, the city of San Francisco, I think, is in the lowest tier. They're in yellow, but yet they've made some adjustments so that not everything that's allowed to be open is opened. So that's something that the county is warning the business community about. And then Simon, I want to know if I can share a screen.
Sure. Let me see if I
Okay.
can go ahead and make you a co-host. Let's see.
I'm going to talk a little bit about, it started as a 10-point framework and it's now become an 11-point framework. So it's definitely a fluid document.
Yeah. Can you share now, Joanne?
Let's try. I think so, yeah. All right, so can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned before, Keep Marin Working is a group of the largest business communities in the county. And so we're trying to strengthen the voice of business throughout the county. And we came up with this 11-point recovery plan framework. It's really a collaboration of all of us. When we realized that Marin did not have a plan, we went to the county of Sonoma, we looked at what was working for them, and we adopted what we felt was really important to us. So the very first thing is we believe we need to have an economic recovery strategy. There is no county-wide economic development plan. So the county has submitted for some grant funding through Marin Economic Forum. And if they secure that grant funding, they will at least be able to adopt a plan. We won't have enough funds to implement it, but at least we'll have a strategy. One of the things that really came out of the pandemic is there will be some businesses that won't survive the pandemic, and there'll be more that won't come back to pre-pandemic levels. So we really relied on our leisure and hospitality sector. So how do we recover from that? How do we train our workforce for the next, industry sectors that may blossom from this? There are pros and cons. It depends on who you talk to. I was in a separate meeting where they were talking about the offices and being really positive about how office space is going to be repurposed. And they were very positive about it and saying that a lot of the CEOs who were working in San Francisco but living in Marin, and Joe, you know this, they're now looking at bringing their workforce back over to Marin and staying in Marin County and utilizing those office spaces. So there's really, there's pros and cons to this, but what the chamber is finding is those small businesses, and I believe 90% of them are 5 or less employees, were really flying by the seat of their pants. They had no plan. They didn't know how to do a business plan. They will live in, week to week, month to month. And when you had to close down for all those weeks, it really made a huge impact. One of the other issues we feel really strongly about is providing regulatory relief. And I'm sure you've all talked about this. The Chamber's been talking about it for years. Some of my colleagues on Keep Marin Working really wanted to put a freeze on any new fees or any fee increases. As you all know, the city of San Rafael just passed Measure R and the chamber was supportive of that. What the chamber is doing is asking the city of San Rafael to look at their master fee schedule and look at where they can put freezes, temporary freezes, because we understand that also the local cities and towns are suffering from this pandemic. So we're really delighted that Measure R did pass. But are there areas where they can also not increase their fees? So as an example, we asked them to look at any business license fee that is coming up for renewal for a business that was closed for that amount of time or hasn't really come back and can express a hardship. Focus on business retention and expansion of our current employers. It's much more difficult to recruit a new business, especially during the pandemic, than it is to provide services to our existing businesses. Invest in infrastructure. One of the biggest problems you've read about is connectivity issues. So I'm sure you've all seen photos of kids, sitting on the floor of a cafe or something doing their homework. Well, that impacts the business community as well. So we really want the county to look at how can we get Wi-Fi and how can we get connectivity throughout the entire county. And making housing and transportation a top priority. Again, the pandemic has exacerbated the housing crisis, and definitely for those who are underhoused and in crowded housing. And the county is beginning to do that and repurpose some of the offices and some of the hotels into homeless housing. Give preferences to local vendors. We would like the county and the cities and towns to definitely launch into a Go Local campaign this holiday season to combat that online competition that was already in place, but also to look at supply chains and where that's lacking. And what came out of this pandemic also is or let me just say, there's no centralized point of entry for a job seeker right now. There's a lot of workforce development programs in our county, but if you're a veteran, you go to one place. If you're a woman over 50, you go to another place. If you're not a high school graduate, you go to a different place. So we are asking them to look at all of the workforce development programs in the county, how they're funded, how people get to them, how do they apply to them, how do they get notified about these programs, and come up with a centralized point. Childcare is a huge issue. I think I read recently that 800,000 women left the workforce nationally because of childcare issues. So if you're a single mom or you and your kids didn't go to school, whatever you want to say about it, our schools are childcare, providers as well. So childcare is definitely an issue that needs to be solved. And the other two, changing land use. I know you are all familiar with that. Again, we talked about, repurposing buildings, repurposing hotels, maybe changing commercial zoning into mixed use and residential zoning where feasible too. That's a tough one. The chamber is, we don't want to give up the little commercial zoning we have here, but there are some that are interested in that. So we think that should be explored as well. And then right at the top of this presentation, I talked about disaster preparedness and how important and vital that is. Right, I'm going to stop there. And then I can talk about housing a little bit. I know I'm very curious of your letter to the city. What is the CAC recommending in terms of the inclusionary zoning requirements? Are you recommending 15%? I'm just curious. I'll talk. Any one of the bills want to answer?
I was muted there for a moment. The other bill should speak on this as well, but basically the thrust of our letter is that we recognize that there are good quantifiable reasons why the change to a lower percentage is being proposed. But the one thing that the CAC really hung on was to ensure that there's a formal process for reevaluating the results of the lowered percentages, whether they're getting the job done, whether they should be looked at and perhaps changed again in the future. And I'm trying to remember what our recommended time frame is.
4 to 5 years.
4 to 5 years, yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So, and I believe I heard Roger Smith mention that in a chamber meeting. So create a threshold. It either could be a time threshold or it could be a number of units threshold. I think that, you know, the system hasn't worked, right? So the chamber was one of the earlier supporters a decade ago of changing it to 20% because we're definitely supportive of affordable housing, but it hasn't worked. And so they need to make drastic changes. But I agree that there needs to be a measure of, you know, whether this is successful or not and whether it's working. So I thank you. I appreciate that letter.
And Joanne, we did support the 10%.
That's awesome. That's great. Thank you so much. Because I think they're going to get some pushback on that. I know certainly that came up during the recent city council races in District 4 that, you know, people just don't understand. And at the same time that the city was commissioning their housing report, the chamber was commissioning a housing report, and we came to the same conclusions that 10% is really the only way that we're going to spur development right now. And it doesn't have to be forever and always. Let's just get some development going. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the plan or anything else. I know you're interested in, you know, I mean, I can give you just a couple examples of small businesses in having to look at their business models. So for example, there's a sole proprietor, and she was very successful in selling promotional marketing materials to businesses like pens for Bank of Marin, or, you know, notepads for First Federal Savings, or all the tote bags when we passed the plastic bag ban. But she didn't have a website. She just based her business on referrals, and she based her business on connections. She was a very strong chamber member. She went to all the mixers, and that's how she survived. But in the pandemic, you can't do that anymore. So it forced her to learn how to create a website or to invest in her company and have to do her business differently. So will she survive? I don't know. Did she do it soon enough? That's a good question. But then you have a business like Mike's Bikes, who, you know, had the savvy and had the talent to make the pivot, and I hate to use that word because it's so overused, but make the adjustment that they needed, and they're thriving. You know, yeah, sure, they want to sell, you know, $5,000 bikes, and they will because they had a huge internet presence anyways, but they were able to make it work. There's a restaurant. Our restaurants were able to make the outdoor dining spaces work for them and the curbside. There's still challenges there because, you know, it's not the same capacity as being inside, but it's enough to keep them going.
You know, question sort of related to that, Joanne, is there are some people that sadly have gone out of business.
Yep.
And, you know, entrepreneurs tend to be resilient and persistent. And I suspect that there are some who are sitting on the sideline. Lord knows how, you know, how they're financially surviving in the meantime, but who are of the ilk that they would want to get back into business, whether it's the same business changed a little bit, or maybe even, you know, serial entrepreneurship and a new business. Any thoughts or experience with businesses that unfortunately have lost it but may come back? And what resources, and maybe financial resources, but also expertise, are available for people like that? And is my sense that there is maybe a fairly large cadre of people in that category correct?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for example, there was a business called Gathering Time, and I think it's on the corner of 4th and D or E. And they were in a really They're in a
Yeah.
really large space. And I had heard that they were leaving that space and they were going to go 100% online. But the opportunities for moving locations now, one, they're probably going to be able to renegotiate a lease. And any of the property owners on here understand that. So you're going to make a new deal. And then the other thing that the city is looking at is changing the levels of review for these. So going into the pandemic, if you're a business like that and you want to go to a new location, to not make them go through the usual review process. So the planning review gets down to the zoning administrator, and maybe even the zoning administrator can go down to over the counter level. So they're looking at those, changing those. I don't know about people having the being financially secure that they're just waiting it out. I mean, some of the businesses like McCroskey's Mattress, I mean, maybe it was they were, they're a family-owned business that's been around for a really long time, and they came from San Francisco and they were trying out Marin, and maybe the Marin market wasn't for them anyway, so this was just an opportunity to get out, and perhaps they'll consider coming back. That's a good question. I don't really know.
They closed 2 stores. I hadn't realized that they had a Palo Alto store. They closed that also.
Mhm.
And before that, they had just made a big change, farming out their manufacturing.
Mhm.
So they may have just been changing
Mhm.
everything starting from before the pandemic.
And if it wasn't a US made product, or they had, other pieces of their product that were coming from overseas, it was delay in getting that. I mean, I went to Martin and Harris, the appliance store on 4th Street, to buy a dishwasher. And you walk in there and they're all the display, that's all empty, and they can't get any product in. And I think I was going to have to wait 3 months for the model that I wanted. I ended up getting a different model because I didn't want to wait that long. So, I mean, it's all those factors are playing into these decisions. McCroskey's, like I said, it's a family-owned business. Maybe they just wanted to get out of it anyways. It was a good opportunity. Somebody was going to retire and one of the kids didn't want to take it over. Who knows? All of those factors play in. And Starbucks just deciding that they were going to not renew their lease. They did that all over the country.
Yeah, ours was in part, at least, because they're going to much smaller spaces. I made them get a bigger space than they wanted 20 years ago when I put them in there.
There you go.
Because they wanted that corner.
Right.
But they also want drive-throughs and smaller spaces.
Right.
So, it just made sense for them not to exercise their option.
Well, I think also you have to realize, so there's a couple other components. One is being, the impacts of climate change. And so they want a smaller footprint. They like that drive-through. They don't need that big space. And then, of course, you have the whole diversity and equity and inclusion component. And how is that going to impact everything?
Joanne, what's your overall sense for the viability of downtown longer term as this drags on?
I don't want to be a downer, but I'm really worried. I think that we were already moving into the thinking that downtowns are not transactional, they're experiential. And pre-COVID, and downtown Santa Fe has always been incredibly transactional. So people drove here and they came here to do business. So it wasn't like you were going to spend the day hanging out in downtown San Rafael. And so perhaps this is an opportunity for downtown San Rafael to become that and put energy into that. Because I don't know, you have to have that piece of it, though downtown, and I would argue lots of areas of East San Rafael are the only place where you can get that service in the county, or it's a preferred service. So you are driving to San Rafael for that reason. But I mean, I think all the other retailers and whatnot, it's going to be all about the experience.
But it's also downtown, at least 4th Street is very restaurant and bar heavy.
Yep.
And a lot of folks came for that and then perhaps did some shopping as an ancillary activity. So one feeds off the other, and it hasn't worked out very well in the last 8 months. I've got a question for you.
Okay.
Your 11-point plan has some fantastic action items and suggestions. And but you mentioned that as you expose it to various jurisdictions, there's perhaps some pushback or hesitancy to adopt some of those action items or engage in them. Can you elaborate on that? And
I'm happy to. I think, and it's all, we were all trying to react the best that we could. And Keith Marin was trying to lead the charge. And it was too much for the county and for the local cities and towns to digest all at once. We had really thought that because Sonoma had already done it and had success with it, that Marin was just going to say, okay. They didn't. They really parsed it out and would say to us, well, we're already doing this piece of it. We're already doing that piece of it. They didn't want to take it as a whole. So what we did was we tried to hone in on what were the 3 specific areas that were the most important. What was the top priority areas? Number 1 was creating a plan, right? So that was the first one. The second one was this workforce development piece, and really wrapping our arms around how many programs are out there, how effective are they? We believe there's a lot of funding. Funding comes down from the state and from the federal government. There's a lot of funding. We don't feel like it's being very effective in Marin County. It could be more effective, and we need this centralized point. So we're working on that. The supervisors did take on the childcare piece. They got a large grant from the Community Foundation to kind of take that piece on. So yeah, and so the third piece was this Go Local campaign. It was really, Glenn, something that was easy for us to do. City San Rafael already did it. Sausalito had already had one. So what we said was, okay, each local town and city will do their own, but then we really wanted the county to create a Shop Marin campaign. And so we met with them this morning, and I think that's going to happen. And it just kind of brands them, but also creates some sort of community pride.
So their plan, Sonoma's plan, was put together in response to the fires. Is that what it was?
In 2017. But I think one of the things too is they used a lot of their CARES Act funding to help the business community, where the county of Marin not necessarily did that. They're spending most of their CARES Act money on rental assistance.
The county of Marin is not focused on the business community at all. I mean,
Right.
Never has been. So it's been, this is all pretty new for them. And so their response shouldn't be probably surprising to us, but it can be disappointing. We're San Rafael. I mean, actually, my question for you, Joanne, is San Rafael, in my impression, is worked really hard to support its business community in all sorts of ways. So
Yes.
Not always as successful as we'd like, but not always as successful as anybody would like. It's not just the business, everybody wants things to work. But what weaknesses do you think San Rafael has? Because I want to ask that question because I'm kind of curious. Our committee, I would like our committee to be as effective as possible, and so I'm trying to figure out what weaknesses you perceive San Rafael having, and then it's how can our committee help?
I'm so impressed with the city of San Rafael's response. I mean, they stepped up to the plate, definitely with this outdoor dining program that they're doing with the BID, and waiving the encroachment fees and creating an umbrella insurance so that everybody didn't have to do that, streamlining the application process, making it super simple. And now really, they're really looking at what more can we do? So this tiered level of review for, use permits and for moving spaces, looking at their master fee schedule. I will tell you the greatest challenge I believe that they're having right now is in the Canal neighborhood. and really trying to support that community and make massive policy changes that are lasting. So not just recover from the pandemic, but change the economic viability of that community. And they're working hard on that. So where this committee can be effective, I think you are effective. I think you're involved in the right things. You're involved in the housing crisis. You're involved in, trying to keep downtown vital. But that piece is something that is growing in its importance.
So
changes
Joanne,
do you-
it struck me that when you said one of your first impressions in moving into this pandemic was that there was not a plan, right? There was no plan in place for disaster, I think you said. And that rang a bell for me with the current grand jury report on climate adaptation and getting ready to respond to climate impacts more effectively, where I think some of the same resistances that you were describing are kind of emerging in that process as it moves from town to town, and they consider their responses to that grand jury report, which is going on right now. So I don't know. I just wonder whether, how aware you guys are of that and how you view that, and is there an opportunity here to build on, build business resiliency into that sort of emergency planning process that the jurisdiction so far are kind of saying, well, don't worry about it, we've already done these plans. And that's really not the case. Anyway, is there an opportunity there? What do you think?
Absolutely. And I would have to defer to you because I think that's your space that you live in. But I think we can work together on it. And I believe there's some action items in our 11-point framework that address that. But we don't go into depth about it because that's not our, that's not top of mind for us all the time, but it's absolutely. And I'm sure you're talking about the sea level rise and the plan for managed retreat and
fires you mentioned.
Fire, absolutely. It's so I think that what is a good question for the CAC to ask any elected official that you host at your meeting is, what did they learn from this? What did they learn from this pandemic, and how are they going to change how they make policy decisions?
Is there any data? You said the biggest issue is the canal area. Do we have data on what the residents there do for income? We're not seeing a lot of tenants who can't pay rent and that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, there are a lot who work in construction, landscaping, things like that.
House cleaning.
And then at the same time, I know ones who have shops of their own, who work at banks, etc. Do we have now, or will we get from the census some idea of what those residents do, so that we can aim what we're doing at what they really need?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would invite Omar Carrera to a meeting to talk to you about that. He has, I don't know if he has listed, there are five policy requests, and I think it was on the council meeting agenda on Monday night. Looking at the first right of refusal for any nonprofit to acquire a for sale property, preventing any hedge fund from purchasing distressed properties, freezing rents for a year, 0% loans to help pay these debts, extend the rental moratorium. So, these are really big policy changes that are going to take a lot of thought and effort into making sure that their intention serves the people that they're supposed to serve, and that there aren't unintended consequences. So it's a big lift.
What are the problems though that are perceived in the canal though? there's the employment, I mean, there's the living side of the canal, you know, they're part
Mm-hmm.
live, and then there's the business side of the canal. They're not necessarily, they're certainly not the same.
No.
There's a lot of overlap, certainly, but not the same. I'm not sure. I mean, some of the problems of the canal are so structural and so hard to change that it's, you know, parking, all the, you know, the type of buildings that are there.
George, in the meeting.
I'm sorry.
I hope so.
I mean, they're our workforce, right? So these are the people that are showing up and they're, you know, bagging our groceries and they're serving our food and they're cleaning our houses and mowing our lawns and putting gas in our car. And I mean, and if they're not well, then it impacts all of us. And so I think that it's not just about the business owners that are minority owned in East Center Fell. It's about the actual residents that live there and the jobs that they're providing and the service that they're providing to our community, and making sure that they're and I say healthy in a broad way, economically healthy, financially healthy. I mean, physically healthy. I think it's really important for the success of San Rafael, for the overall success of San Rafael.
Joanne, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think one of the other things that's come out of COVID, besides the issue that so many of them are essential workers,
Right.
and also can't afford not to work, which
Right.
has caused this a big portion reason for the spike in the coronavirus cases. It's the children that live there that when we've finally gotten them connected to Wi-Fi, their parents, often English is their second, they are, you know, first generation here. And so they don't have the ability to, doing online learning is incredibly challenging for
Right.
them.
Yep.
And what support are we, you know, I know there's some kids from Dominican that speak Spanish that are, you know, coaching some families, but I'm sure it's nowhere near enough.
So what I understand is the county got some funding and they created learning hubs. So, and they're cohorts of students who need this extra help. I know there's one in Bolinas because my daughter is the supervisor. Basically, she just sits there, rolls the tables out, sanitizes them, makes sure that the kids are online. If they have any questions, she's able to answer them. She's not trained in any way, shape, or form because they are just scrambling to make this happen. But I do think it's helpful to some of those kids that needed it. I mean, it's a secure network, so they're able to get on. They're also not sitting in a crowded home, like you said. If you have, 5 or 6 people trying to get on a really bad Wi-Fi system, you're not going to get good connectivity. So it's been a Band-Aid. But one of the things, again, talking about the positiveness of it, is perhaps that's a new model. Perhaps schools could look at that and they could actually have a course where you're trained to help these students. So maybe you have a little bit more than just, you're just babysitting them, you're actually able to help them. So is that an opportunity?
But my concern is they're still losing so much ground.
Oh yeah. Yes. And I can share with you, like I said, my husband's a teacher at Tam High, and it's very depressing. And kids, he is definitely losing kids, and you just want them to show up, never mind trying to do the work. And you probably read in the paper, I think it was last semester, no student was going to get or fail, and every student was going to pass or get an incomplete, and they didn't even give incompletes. It's just too much.
So you mentioned a minute ago the importance of minority-owned businesses in the canal.
Uh-huh.
And I'm wondering if, as the chamber considers a local preference ordinance in San Rafael, whether that could be coupled with a minority business enterprise ordinance as well. It seems like the two together, this might be the right time to move both of those together.
I think that's a great idea. I think it's a great idea, Bill. And I know that the community development block grant funding, the 25% of it that went to help business communities, that funding is tied to minority-owned businesses in specific census tracts. And the argument is they didn't have the same opportunities as those who weren't in the census tract, right? So they had were able to secure the PPP and the EIDL loans, whereas these others weren't. So yeah, I think that this is an opportunity to do that. And I'm just going to be really frank. I think we may get some pushback from that, though. Just some of the chamber memberships I have spoken to is it really needs to be about those who are suffering economically, right? So not necessarily the color of your skin, but those that have been suffering and have been suffering for a while.
Yeah.
So we might get some traction with that.
Well, and again, that might be brought in too as a disadvantage, but they're not exclusive. I mean, you could have both.
Absolutely.
Or a combination. I just feel like, and I remember the pushback from 5 or 6 years ago when it was being discussed. But I just think now times have changed, and with this experience and with what's going on with trying to correct, injustices, this might be the time to do it.
Absolutely. And so there's a Marin Council of Chambers. There's 11 chambers in the county, and we've formed a Marin Council of Chambers. And from that, we formed a diversity, equity, and inclusion task force to look at this. And we're able to partner with the Marin IJ. They got a grant from the Community Foundation to fund it. But once a week, it's actually beginning tomorrow, once a week, we are going to highlight a Black, Indigenous, or people of color owned business. And it's all through the chambers. It's being split up equitably so that like San Rafael and Novato communities who have more business members will have more of them promoted. But it is just our way of trying to say, yeah, there's been some injustices and let's try to right it at this time.
Joanne, you mentioned earlier that the chamber was assisting some of our businesses in getting PPP loans.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
We provide a lot of technical assistance. Worked really with Danielle O'Leary is just a star, and she was able to help people. But there was so much confusion back then, and there's still confusion right now. As a matter of fact, on Tuesday we're having a little webinar on the loan forgiveness. And again, I don't even think they've come out with the program yet. So
they've come out with quite a bit on the forgiveness,
okay.
Including 3 different types of applications for forgiveness,
Mm-hmm.
and a bunch of rules, but they're still coming out with new rules, every
Right.
couple of weeks, it seems.
Right.
But I was wondering if the chamber is going to also be assisting with the upcoming wave of forgiveness applications, because the survival of a lot of our businesses may depend on those loans actually being forgiven, so they don't have to be repaid.
Absolutely. So we've invited Bank of Marin. Like I said, they're coming on Tuesday to give a little webinar on that. Whatever information we can push out to our membership and the business community at large, we will do that. We also partnered with Marin SBDC. I don't know if you all know Miriam. She's great, and she's done a lot of workshops on that as well to help. She did a lot on trying to help businesses get the loan, but now she's doing them on the forgiveness part as well. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Joanne, thinking back to what you were saying about long-term and having it more experiential and less transactional.
Mm.
I'm wondering if continuing a program like Dining Under the Lights past pandemic, if you see that as something, I mean, as a stakeholder in the community, as a citizen, I love it. I wish I was out there tonight. But, thinking about the economic development side, is that something that you see our businesses interested in? I mean, I know a lot of it's just survival day to day, but is that something that you think would be?
I do. And there was a lot of conversation about, gee, should we close down B Street? Should we close down A Street? Should we close down C Street? I caution against doing too much of it because we also are, there's so many people traveling through, and we do have a lot of, I mean, you know, you got to get to your bank or your office and whatnot. So, but I definitely can see some program continuing and being permanent. For sure.
And
Um,
has the expanded like parklet and the program that I believe the city has been involved with, getting those built out, is that planned to be a permanent kind of structure, I guess?
Well, I'll come in and then I'll let Simon inform. So I believe the Dine Under the Lights program was extended to November 20th. And then the Business Improvement District actually asked if we could extend it, they could extend it through the spring months. I'll be super honest, I got a little bit nervous about that because of the uncertainty of everything. It was just like, I didn't know if the Christmas season or the holiday season, I shouldn't say Christmas, the holiday season, you know, from those retailers that Glenn talked about, do we want to leave the parking open? Do we want 4th Street to, so you can drive down it? So I think that because of the winters coming, they're going to stop it in November 20th, but there's no reason why we couldn't pick it back up again after the new year. One thing about the parklets is pre-pandemic, there was a lot of pushback about taking up too many parking spaces. So there was a pilot, the city said, okay, we're going to do these 4, I believe. And then, and I believe, yes, I believe there were 4. Then we did the temporary ones. And my thing is the temporary ones don't look too good to me. And they're just barricades. And some businesses have really invested in it and it looks great. I mean, Pond Farm is a wonderful example, but others are just, you know, stringing streamers across it. It doesn't look good. So for me, I want it to look really nice. So I would totally support if they went to the business owner and said, we're going to make this permanent if you invest in the structures, then I would support that.
And do you think that businesses could afford to do that in the next, I don't know, say 12 months or so?
You know, from what I've been hearing from the BID is some can and some can't.
Yeah.
So why did, you know, Pond Farm was able to, he's one of those, you know, super savvy business owners and knows what's going on, and other ones struggle with that. So I would think that if we could find a way to help them, is the best course of action. Because I think it's really important for downtown to look the best that it can look. Otherwise it's you know, they have so much competition. We have to make it an inviting environment.
Just to add to that, thanks, Joanne. So we will be going, every year we go back to the city council to renew the BID assessment. And this year we'll be going back on November 16th and December 7th. What it essentially does is allows us to, you know, keep on continuing to assess the businesses within the district for the following year. So within that item, there's a report out and a summary of what's happened in the previous year. Obviously, with COVID-19, it's been a very different year, and we have had a lot of events canceled, you know, or modified in some way, shape, or form. So Dining Under the Lights has been, you know, the signature event, quote unquote, and the most consequential, as you're all probably aware, and, you know, probably the most receptive that we've seen so far. And I think Joanne is absolutely correct. It has been extended to November 20th. There has been discussion about whether or not we can pick this back up as soon as possible in the following year. And I think we'll get some council feedback on December 7th. So it'll be probably a little bit more fleshed out by then. In terms of the parklets, we have had a pilot program for 4 permanent ones. And those were all have been spoken for. And now that COVID has hit, we've had obviously the temporary program in place. And, you know, we have, you know, varying levels of investment, right? Depending on the restaurateur, you know, on what they look like. And I think initially it was really done as a lifeline for all of our restaurants who weren't able to operate inside. And we totally understand why some of them do not have the capital to invest any further. into these types of outdoor dining platforms. But now that we are month 7 into this, we've gotten a steady trickle of additional inquiries about permanently building this out. So I can say that maybe 3 restaurants have approached me regarding, making something that's more permanent, that looks more attractive. And I think those are the ones that are probably going to be more committed and invested to make it look a lot nicer. And I think, it really depends on the perspective of the restaurateur. Some of these restaurateurs don't necessarily see the outdoor dining as a long-term solution. They would rather reinvest their money in other facets of their business that they think is more important. And that's totally valid and it's totally fine. So I think we do have the ability to hopefully transition this program into maybe more permanent parklets, but the number, the scope, the location, there are competing businesses who really don't like them. Some of them do like them. I think we're all going to have to weigh those and balance all those different really needs and concerns. So we're actively discussing it. I think eventually we'll get probably some more traction, hopefully in the next month or so, maybe in the early new year. So we're still really taking in feedback.
Yeah, and Joanne, as the council is considering the renewal of the BID, is there anything that our committee, that you as the Chamber of Commerce would ask our committee to recommend to them that we can consider?
I think certainty helps. So if the business owner knows that they're going to be able to do the outdoor dining area, they're more likely to invest in it. And then also if we told them that they could make it was going to be permanent, then they would really put some energy and some effort into it. So I think that is what I would request from the city is, but there's a lot of pushback on taking up parking spaces. It's a big issue. I know there's some people that want to close down 4th Street to all through traffic and make it pedestrian only. I don't know.
There's more than just restaurants in downtown Santa Fe.
Yeah, and the
retailers don't need the parking right now.
Retailers are not coming out though. The retailers are not, they have the ability to take out the space in front of them as well temporarily on Thursday and Friday nights and put their goods and wares out, but they're not for various reasons. So I would love the BID to put energy into getting those retailers to come out, and whether that's purchasing tents or something, so that it's not just the restaurants.
It strikes me that I'm going to your point about it needs to look good, which has always been kind of a obstacle for me in terms of these temporary parklets or the parklets. They're kind of one-off and they don't hold together particularly well in my design eye. So we've got a design review board right now, which is about to be underemployed. And maybe they could be, give them a charrette problem to come up with how do you make this stuff look good. And the idea, like you mentioned, tents and things like that. I mean, the idea of kind of more flexible ways of intervening and claiming this space on a temporary basis, but it would still look good and hang together. I mean, it could look like a real market town, and yet you could roll it up again and have your parking during the day or whatever. Things like that really need to be explored with a good design eye, rather than kind of letting it to the whimsies of individual owners, in my opinion. So that's something you might explore, or we might explore.
That's awesome, and I would love to participate on that in that conversation. The idea behind the planters was they were on casters that the business owner could wheel in and out, and I think the barricades were also supposed to be stacked up. Well, they're heavy, they're hard to move. They didn't want to do that, it was extra staff. So, I mean, these are things that we're just learning. But yeah, I totally agree with you, Bill. That's the kind of creative thinking that I'm looking for, and I would love to participate in that conversation.
Joanne, where does the farmer's market fit into all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joe. And I think Simon was kind of alluding to it because it's, Dine Under the Lights is really the only event. And will we be having other events? Will the BID be able to, have the car show? I love the fact that on Thursday nights, it's our local businesses. That's who we're showcasing. The farmers market was very well received. The community loved the farmers market. But in order to make it financially viable, they had to bring in outside vendors. And especially during the pandemic, I just couldn't support that. And look how the Dine Under the Lights program worked. They're all coming out. They all want to be part of it. And Simon had just said that many of them want to have permanent parklets. So I don't know where the farmers market fits in. Do they join us in this? And we have an actual market. Can we get more of our retailers to vend like the outside vendors were being brought in? That would be my vision, is that it's all about San Rafael and all about those brick and mortar businesses that are already here.
Joanne, going back to your notion of making downtown an experience, I think that's one of the advantages of the Dining Under the Stars event, is that it's bringing people and families, at least that's what I've noticed, into downtown that typically weren't there.
Yep.
And in fact, we were in Santa Barbara recently, and they've closed down 20 blocks of State Street.
Wow.
It's 24/7.
Wow.
Not believe the difference. The restaurants are, no, they're not thriving. Obviously, they're still hurting. But what they're hopeful for is they want it to continue, because it's bringing people downtown that weren't there before.
Yep, totally agree. I totally agree. And I think one of the things that I would recommend we experiment with is maybe a Sunday afternoon, right? Where, instead of 2 evenings, or maybe it's a Saturday or something like that, because a lot of the restaurants are open at night, but a lot of the smaller businesses close up. So how can we tie those two things together? I would definitely support that.
You'd have to
I'm all about
rename
that.
the night. It can't be Dining Under the Lights if you want people to have an expectation of
Right.
shopping.
Right. And when we can have music again, and when we can have, activities, it could be really an expanded farmers market, because really the farmers market was more a festival, right? It was a festival place to go on Thursday nights that the community loved to go. And so that's why I think the Dine Under the Lights was so successful on Thursday night, is because everybody was used to it anyways. So when we can start to add those other components and it becomes an event, I could see it really expanding.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So following up on Mari's question, going beyond Dining Under the Stars, anything else that the chamber would like to see our committee, which is economic development and housing, pushing on?
So are you economic development for the whole city or just the downtown area?
Whole city, this is not redevelopment anymore.
Oh, right. Forgot about that. Obviously, Northgate, keep your eye on what's going on at Northgate. The chamber is looking at downtown, East San Rafael and North San Rafael. We just had an election. I don't know how it's going to impact things. But yeah, so advocating for obviously housing at Northgate, but also it is our, few commercial areas that we need to keep intact as best we can. And
Joanne, just a preview of coming attractions. At our next meeting, I think we're going to have both items on the agenda. We're going to be looking at those primary development areas, the Northgate and Canal area, as well as the downtown specific plan. So
Great.
we're very much focused on that.
Great.
If as a member of the public, by the way, you ever want to sit in on our meetings,
Sure.
It's for Thursday of every month.
Yeah, so I think, and I know Roger's been really into this with the downtown precise plan. So supporting form-based code, that's really important. And making sure that the city doesn't add the level of service in to the VMT calculation. So there was some conversation about leaving the level of service in certain intersections in Terra Linda. And in any way that we can combat that would be good.
That hasn't been mentioned to us, so.
I think if you look closely, there's some.
I'm sure it's there. It just hasn't been mentioned.
Yeah.
Could you explain that one a little bit? It kind of went by me.
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it justice, but so you know that the state is now saying that all the calculation is through vehicle miles traveled, not level of service. But I think a local jurisdiction can keep that some part of level of service. They can decide where they want to keep that part of it. And there's some conversation about keeping it at some of the intersections in Terra Linda. For North San Rafael, all of North San Rafael.
Yeah, that is a direction that the council seems to be going in. I was unclear about what your feelings are about that.
I'm concerned that it will be restrictive, and it will be another obstacle for development in that area.
The level of service or the VMT?
The level of service.
It's so easy to point at that as a reason for saying, no, we really shouldn't do this here.
Correct. Right. It's too easy. So, and I don't know how that actually gets fleshed out in a PDA though. I'm not sure.
It'll be a topic. Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to go back to some of the discussion about what can be done on 4th Street, by way of parklets or bulbs or other uses of the streetscape, and put in a word for parking. I come downtown, my office is just off 4th Street, and I'm downtown all the time. So, I know if there are no spaces on the street, I know where the garages are, and I have a parking lot by my building. I have a sense, however, that there are a lot of people as to whom a trip downtown, by downtown I mean 4th Street, is discretionary. And if they can't find a space on the street, or if they have a sense that the spaces on the street are all being occupied and it's going to be hard to find a space, they will opt not to go downtown. I don't have any data to support that, but I have a notion that ready availability of spaces on the street is a real determinant of people providing traffic coming downtown to 4th Street. So I don't know what the solution is, but I think there really is a tension, and it's not merely a side note, as to the effect of plans like parklets on use of the streetscape and elimination of parking spaces. There's a real tension there, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. And in pre-pandemic, I mean, when the SMART train was causing the backup and the massive congestion on the freeway, and then you made the trek down from Novato or even from the Peacock Gap area to come into downtown San Rafael, and you're already frustrated when you get here and you can't find parking, that's a problem. And whether it's real or perception, we got complaints about it all the time. So now we have an opportunity to look at it differently. And I think we're making strides with that in terms of, we were making strides with that in terms of having the SMART train and creating good bike lanes and whatnot. But I honestly, I don't know how it's going to play out in the next 5 years. I don't know if we're going to come back to the same levels we were. Again, I'll have to get my crystal ball. Have a crystal ball.
On the crystal ball subject, if you don't mind a little bit of a change of tone, I'm curious as to what changes there are going to be that are just changes in the environment as a result of how we've changed the way we live during the pandemic. specifically, for example, I hear so many people saying, why the hell did I ever go into the office in the first place anyway? I function just as well, maybe even better from home. And it just seems to me that's going to have an overwhelming effect on both the vacancy rates. By the way, on the other side of that, I hear people saying that there's going to be, and it already is, a bit of a migration from San Francisco to the surrounding cities like San Rafael, and that may mitigate that.
Yep.
Another thing is, I was never much of an outdoor diner, but now that I've been eating outdoors before the restaurants opened up, I love dining outdoors. Never really thought about it much. I suspect that in its own little way, that's going to be a change. Can you just kind of pull out that crystal ball and tell us, some things that you think are maybe permanently changing?
I think depending on the industry, you're definitely going to have more telework. So if think of BioMarin, and all of their employees, unless you're doing research and development, you need to be there, they're going to be working from home. So that's going to have a change. But then I talk to a lot of attorneys who they want that interaction. They want, especially if you're a younger attorney and you're looking for a role model, and you're looking for somebody to help you along, you're going to want to be and have those interactions, those in-person interactions. So it really depends. I think, again, the travel industry has been hit really hard. And I don't know what that will look like for Marin. Are we still going to have business travel? Are we going, people are going to come and stay in the hotels because they want to, go mountain biking, and they want to go to the Mill Valley Film Festival? Those are all great questions, Bill. And I think there will definitely be some industries where we're going to lose permanently, and others that are going to come out of it, that have positively come out of it. Packaging, there's a lot of shipping going on. So, green packaging, for instance. More Zoom. We're on Zoom right now. We're probably going to find many more video conferencing platforms. Cybersecurity. There's such a need to protect our data now. I think that's another industry that will boom. The healthcare industry. We need to be training contract tracers. We need to be training upskilling nurses. Making sure that they're in specialized fields. So there's some positive things that are going to come out of it as well.
Going back to your one of your early points about things becoming more experiential, it strikes me that as we live on our screens more and more, once the virus is out of the way, the desire to get away from the screens are going to be pretty intense, so that people are going to want to go down to cafes as an office extension, as a workplace, which have always been used for, traditionally. I had a guy who worked for me once, who worked with me, who I could never find because he was always in the cafe, working on his next big project. But so that's always been the case. But it also strikes me that for a lot of people, cafes or restaurants or whatever, are like living rooms. They're the place where you go and you kind of hang out, but you're hanging out in public, and it's a whole different experience. And it's one that I think we now increasingly see we really enjoy and need. So, keeping those things in mind, it may be that an active 4th Street is serving as a living room and an office space for a lot of people. And if those people are living within a couple of blocks and being able to walk there, then you've overcome some parking issues as well.
Yeah.
So that role of housing, I think, is really important too.
And I think as well as more younger families also move into San Rafael, they're going to want to get out as well, because there's too much screen time. I have my 22-year-old daughter graduated Davis and moved back home again. And she's single, and man, she just cannot wait to go back out to, go to a bar and meet a friend and have dinner. Even though they're doing that, it's still not the same. So I totally agree with you. I think that is how small main streets can come back, right? Yeah, Art is going to be really important. Having it, like I said, having the experience be nice and look good and feel good, and where you want to spend time.
Bill, I think that desire to get out is also driving people that have the means to rent small offices away from home so they don't have to be with their kids while they're doing homeschooling and the rest. And I think that's what our area here, San Rafael and the neighboring towns, is really good at supplying, is small suburban multi-tenant office spaces where people can get on their computer, have the peace and quiet that they would, but they still don't need to go to the city, but then be able to go out, go downtown, get a cup of coffee, come back and not be at home. So just keep your eye out for that in terms of a potential positive for what we have going on here.
Yeah. Another industry that I really made the pivot is the fitness, right? So you joined your Pilates studio, or you joined your big gym, and all of a sudden they closed down. Well, they started doing online. You can go online, you can do any Pilates class you want. You got the what do they call those? The trainers, the bikes inside. So, I mean, that was just a really good example of how they were able to adapt. So are they going to continue to do that? Or are they going to offer a hybrid? You can still, do the online classes and go to the gym when you feel like you need that, you want to work out with your friends. You don't want to work out by yourself. So perhaps that's how they're successful, is they do a hybrid.
Yeah, my daughter is a manager of a yoga studio, and they pivoted. They're doing, it's all via Zoom, and she said a lot of their folks just absolutely love it. They don't have to schlep in to go to the classes. They can, do it right from home. They may want to go in on occasion,
Right.
And they're expanded to a much larger audience now too, because they can reach people, anywhere.
Right.
So it's the market. The ones that are being successful are the ones that have expanded their geographic market.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I know you have other agenda items on here, Simon. I don't want to take up all of your time.
No.
If there's any other further questions?
Well, there are a couple of people that we haven't heard from, and maybe they just want to listen. But Madeline, do you have anything you wanted to ask about or add?
No, I mean, I think Member Jones and really, expressed the same things I have. And also, I appreciate you answering, all the questions about kind of what the future is going to look like. So I know I'm of the membership of the Young Families and the Forever Telecommuting. I work for PG&E, and a big corporation in downtown San Francisco, and they've gotten rid of their offices. And we are now going to be home for a good long while. So I'm in downtown San Rafael as much as I can be now, getting lunch and trying to just support the businesses. So I hope we're seeing that too, the boon to like lunch spots and stuff like that with people who don't normally frequent those areas.
Well, thank you.
Gladys,
Thank you for
do we
shopping
hear something?
locally. And think about that this holiday season when you're
Of
buying
course,
gifts for your
I
kids, because it's so easy to order online from Amazon.
No, I learned that through the pandemic. There's a lot of ways to get around it. And
That's great.
at Five Monkeys and other toy stores, you don't have to go to Amazon. So
Right.
Gladys, we haven't heard from you. Are you still with us?
you're on mute, Gladys.
Yes, I'm still here. I'm just listening and thinking about San Rafael and how what's coming for the future. And I like your crystal ball, Joanne.
Well,
because you're
Glad-
going to need it.
the business community in San Rafael is very resilient. We have a great staff here helping. We're going to have a new mayor and a new council. I will tell you, Mayor Collin is very smart woman, and she is going to work with the chamber to try to, boost us back. We'll see. But it's going to be a long road. There will be some changes, but let's look at it as an opportunity.
Kate will do a great job. Should we go to the next item, Bill?
Well, I just want to ask Joanne one question, which is, as I look at my notes here and what I put stars alongside, one thing that I hadn't really thought much about is that because of the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on the canal neighborhood, it seems like you're urging us perhaps in considering our future agenda items you'd mentioned perhaps having Omar Carrera come and speak with us. Do I have the takeaway correct that that's something that you think we probably should spend some time focusing on, the issues pertaining to the canal?
I do, because there are some policy issues that will impact the business community. And so, like I said, the intention is to ensure that they help the people that it's intended to help. So that's what we want to make sure. I know they're struggling right now with the opportunity zone stuff. So yes, I think you should look into it, and you should invite Omar and hear from him.
Bill, I would welcome that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we've just watched the Joanne show and had a chance to call in with some questions, so we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Nice
It was really
breaking
great
seeing you
seeing,
again. Thank you.
really great seeing you all. Nice to meet all the new people, and you guys are doing great work out there. Lots of exciting things. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving and a wonderful holiday.
Thanks for your work, Joanne.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, on to the next agenda item, I think. Project updates. Simon, anything that we ought to be aware of?
Yes, so we had tried to go ahead and provide an update regarding the Seagate project and Northgate Walk that the CAC had requested in the previous meeting. We had reached out to the developer and the architect. We have not heard back from them yet, but we did reach out to the senior planner, Steve Stafford. He said that there isn't any movement currently regarding those projects. They both were approved last year, 2019. And if he has any additional information, he will share that as well. I believe the applications will likely expire in the summer of next year. So we know that the CAC is interested in those, so we'll keep you updated as we get new information.
I'm going to
There's no
scoop
indication as to why.
I'm going to scoop you a little bit on that, Simon, because I happened to talk to Dennis Fisco of Seagate. And, you know, I think our question was, gee, are you guys having second thought, or is there some hang up that we're not aware of? And it was kind of interesting. He said, hey, look, you know, you have to realize that in commercial real estate these days, the financing market is in chaos. And he, without getting into a lot of detail, basically said that their lender was holding them back. But that you know, they're still committed to the project, and there isn't a real hang up. It's really just a delay. And he indicated to me that he thinks he's going to start in the first or second quarter of next year on the 3rd Street project. So that's consistent with getting it done before any of their permits or approvals run out.
Thanks for getting that information, Bill.
That's good news.
Yes, go ahead.
I said, you go ahead.
Oh, the other update that we have is for the Goldstone project at 1001 4th Street, the mixed use, the market hall with the automated parking. We are working quite furiously on trying to get to some sort of agreement regarding the parking. We know that's been key to kind of move forward with this exclusive negotiating agreement. There's been quite a few hiccups along the way. We will likely have to extend the agreement again. So this will be the second time. It's expiring in December, so we at least probably have to extend an additional 6 months. We are hopeful, though, that they are making progress, but really, unfortunately, not a whole lot to share yet, though. So we have that still ongoing. It's not dead yet. And yes.
Well, go ahead. I thought you'd stop.
Well,
yeah. Those are the major updates I have for projects.
What about, has Costco made any more moves?
No, they've been pretty quiet. We've asked our planning manager for an update. He said that no one's reached out to them. They indicated earlier this year that they would give us some sort of status in the next few months, but we never heard back. We've reached out to Ross Gehring too from Lighthouse, and so far nothing, unfortunately.
They are going ahead in Nevada with trying to get approval for their gas stations.
Okay, good to know.
Interesting.
Do we have completion dates for the hotel on Fifth Avenue and the apartment project on 2nd?
The AC Marriott is expected to be complete, I believe, in the end of 2021 or early 2022. And what was the other project, Glenn, that you were referencing?
The one at B and 2nd, the apartment mixed use.
Oh, is that 815 B Street?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we haven't had any update regarding their construction timeline or in terms of their completion, but we expect that they'll be done within a year or two as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Simon, I was a little confused by your answer about the hotel. That seems that the construction seems pretty much underway. I'm surprised that the completion date is that far out.
Well, they've only just constructed the podium portion. So there's quite a bit left. They're anticipating the end of 2021, and that's what they said they were going to stick to. But that's the largest portion of the construction, right? The demolition, the shoring, the foundation were fairly quick, but the building itself is going to take the most time.
It's going to be great once it's done.
Yeah.
We need it.
We definitely hope so.
Absolutely need it.
What's going on with, I forget the name of the project that was near the YMCA.
Is that the housing?
Yes,
we had the
Yes,
Yeah.
it's on the hillside there.
hillside housing.
Yeah. I haven't heard of any additional update from them in recent months. I believe that is, what was that called?
Los Gamos.
Almost housing.
Yes.
Apartment. Yeah. So they've, I mean, they had a study session earlier this year in January, but I haven't heard of any additional update.
I went out to look at that site and there's a whole row of white painted I-beams along the sidewalk. Big ones, like 12 feet tall.
Oh,
Is that from Kaiser maybe? Doing the work on the office building?
It's along the entire Los Gamos sidewalk,
No.
I guess the west side.
Hmm.
Every 50 feet, there's a big I-beam sticking up and it's not holding anything, or could be part of a retaining wall, but it goes 12 feet high.
Don't you know art when you see it, Glenn?
Is that what that is? It could be art. I mean, it could be a Christo thing for all, although he's not around anymore,
I
sadly.
was gonna say,
Well, it would be nice to maybe for the next month's agenda item to kind of go through an inventory of the projects. If we do have like an end of the year, where are we on different projects and what do we have to look forward to next year?
so we refer you to the website, and we have the planners regularly update those project websites. As of right now, we don't have a lot of movement on a lot of the bigger ones. We've received quite a few small applications actually that aren't considered major. And that's been the bulk of what the planning staff's work has been. So not, unfortunately, a whole lot of movement on the larger ones that we feature.
Like, is there anything outside of what's on the website about BioMarin and the PG&E site or anything like that? I mean,
No, not that I know of.
these are going to be changing the whole landscape of downtown when they happen.
Yeah, as far as in terms of like movement, we haven't heard of any additional progress that's been made. We usually like to go ahead and reach out to them periodically to see if they have any, concerns or questions for us. So far, we haven't heard back. I think a lot of these are things that we can refer to the specific planner for particular questions. And then Sean Kennings, he's the contract planner. He hasn't signaled that there's been any additional update.
What about Whistle Stop or whatever they call themselves now?
I can't ever remember.
Yeah.
Eagle on.
Viva
What is it?
Vivalon. Yeah.
Vivalon.
Vivalon.
All I can remember is Viva.
Oh, yeah, I haven't heard of any new update on that project as well.
But they did get approved when BioMarin got the office buildings approved, right?
Yeah.
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 And they're supposed to start much sooner than BioMarin.
Right.
So
I
Did
think
they have a funding component that wasn't ironed out yet until they got the approvals?
they're a
yes.
nonprofit, they always do. But I think they'll get there. I mean, I don't know anything, I don't have any insights here, but they have a very good project. I'm confident they'll be able to attract the right kind of support, but I don't know.
But my guess is there's probably a capital plan, a capital funding component to that, as well as financing.
The capital funding has been going on a long time.
Thanks.
In that same neighborhood on the public side, on the website are plans for the 3rd Street improvements, which are really kind of moving into high gear now in terms of, going from concepts to construction documents. So if you have any thoughts about that project, now would be the time to look at it because it's fast moving. I think it will be moving pretty quickly. It cleared an informational review at the council on Monday night, actually. So the DPW website has that. I'm not sure if it's available through the planning department website, but it is on DPW's page.
Bill, those are the road improvements and reconfigurations of bike paths and so on 3rd. Is that the project?
Yeah, and the big change, since we have at least one cyclist in the group here, there was a very significant change made from a multi-use pathway to a two-lane, two-directional dedicated bike only lane on the same level as the cars, but with barriers to. Anyway, it's a much more dedicated to bikes with pedestrians kind of on one side of it. So it's a different kind of thing than what we've seen before, I think, in San Rafael. So that might be worth Dirk looking at and others to see if you have any thoughts. But that's the direction that it's going. They also have some treatments of the intersections that, to my eye, look pretty good. So there's some interesting stuff there.
Roger's
Thank you
writing
for
a whole
bringing
lot
that to
more
our
than I am,
attention because, we had looked at that somewhat, and then I can, at least for one, completely lost sight of it. I forgot all about that.
Bill, on the same vein, what's the umbrella project for all the work that's being done on East Francisco and the sidewalks there? I mean, that's been going on for some time now. They've got barricades up and everything. I know there was an accident. I mean, they did that bridge over towards Honda a while ago, and that was completed. The whole sidewalk's been torn up for a while, and maybe somebody can help fill in the blank I'm having on what that project was classified under.
I can talk to that, being from the San Pedro Road area, because it causes congestion for us. But the sidewalks are it's part of that larger East Francisco, to your point, Francisco East plan. The first was the bridge. Now is putting in reasonable sidewalks, which is supposed to be done, I believe, by June of 2021, and then they'll repave the road. So it's a lot of it is about pedestrian safety.
Yeah, and I'm assuming bicycles too, because that kind of is
But
it was originally done to get kids from the Canal District to the high school and to San Pedro.
Yep.
So that was its original thing. But
yep.
Hey, Joe, I included a link to the website regarding some of the improvements for Francisco Boulevard that should have some more information.
Thank you.
Sure.
Speaking of links, I've got a question for Roger, since you're active in the chamber. I'd like to get my hands on that 11-point plan. I assume that if we go on the chamber website, it'll be right there.
I can't answer that. I haven't looked for it, but I mean, you can always email Joanne. She'll be happy. I'm sure
Yeah.
she's happy to send it along.
I should have remembered to ask her about it, to, send it out.
Yeah, please, and share it with all of us. That'd be great.
There was significant disappointment with the county's response and their ability to respond and their interest in responding to the crisis from a business point of view. So
It was interesting, not only that she kind of reported that the county response was pretty lax, but also that she was so praised so much the city San Rafael response as being at the other end of the spectrum.
In many ways.
well, I mean, just the existence of this committee shows the city's, dedication to paying attention to these issues. I mean, it's been consistent. The city has done a great job because of a long-term relationship with it, not only, with the chamber and other business parts of the community, and, and seriously taking its input into consideration. And it makes for a balanced city. We're lucky to have such a well-run city.
One thing with regard to that is, when I think about matters of concern to the business community, I'm always kind of unsure whether a question ought to be directed to the BID or to the chamber, and how much they overlap and how much they have really different functions.
Yeah, different, but
I think they've been working collaboratively pretty closely the past year and a half, in an official capacity. During our BID meetings, which you're all welcome to attend, the third Thursday morning on Zoom, Joanne frequently is part of those discussions as well. I think the BID has a very particular lens and a close relationship with all of the merchants in downtown. And they are primarily looking at that perspective. For the most part, they, have very similar philosophies, policies, and perspectives. I do know, maybe to my knowledge, one of the main differences is that, downtown is very much, shop in downtown. Whereas I know the chamber is looking out for the entire economic ecosystem in San Rafael, and it may not necessarily mean shopping exactly on 4th Street.
Is Ida still housed in the chamber?
Yes, unofficially, yeah. I think with COVID and everything, it's hard to pinpoint where everyone is, but she has a space at the chamber.
Right.
I'd like to move to the agenda items 7 and 8. I asked Simon to put those on the agenda because what I think we're planning to do in our December meeting. And by the way, Joe, you were talking about updating some projects, but I think we've got a full agenda for December, just with the 2 items being the priority development areas and the downtown specific plan. And because, well, we've got, people who are great at informing us. Paul Jensen will be available if we want him to be, and Barry is going to be available for the downtown specific plan. And I thought we had to take a little time just to plan, so we use that time most productively. For starters, I thought we ought to talk about whether it's biting off too much to have both of those kind of big picture projects on the same month's agenda. And the way that I thought we could handle both is, with regard to the priority development areas, from my perspective at least, I just like to get more information and understand PDAs better. Whereas with regard to the downtown specific plan, I think I'd like to see us do a little bit of planning now as to what we would ask Barry to emphasize, or what areas we would want to look into most carefully. For example, with regard to the downtown specific plan, Roger thought it was important to focus on what the meaning of historical preservation is in the scope of the downtown specific plan, and how that might have a certain tension with the best economic and business development. And so I welcome any other or any suggestions as to areas that we ought to focus on to make our time with our second pass through on the downtown specific plan most productive. And with regard to the priority development areas, the issues that I think are worth discussing only to understand the process better are, to what extent is this regional planning? To what extent is it our local areas that we're focusing on? It jumps out to me that there was a priority development area for North Marin that was started and then dropped, and what's that all about, and how is the new process for the Northgate area, priority development area, what's the focus and how is it different from what was done before? So I just want to open up the agenda to anybody who wants to suggest how we can go about, well, first of all, anybody who thinks that it's biting off too much to have both topics on the same agenda, and then also what things we should focus on with regard to those two topics.
Bill, I think as long as we have just those two items, I think we're okay. In regard to your question about the PUDs, I want to understand better, what is the objective of the PUDs? What's the outcome supposed to be? It's not clear to me.
Yeah, Katie, you are one of the best informed people around, and you said something to that effect a couple of meetings ago, and I said, oh, gee, I don't have to be too embarrassed about not understanding, and even Katie doesn't understand it.
I think that, that should be our first item, and that because it applies to both areas. But the Northgate one shouldn't be a discussion. Whether we're for it or against it, because that's kind of out of our hands.
I agree.
And it hasn't been done. And so I think getting an understanding of what a PDA is, explaining that, and then what the Northgate one will do, and what its approximate schedule, and then that shouldn't be that long of a conversation.
I agree that for us, it should be primarily an educational thing,
Right.
so we understand the PDA process. For example, I didn't even realize that the downtown specific plan is pursuant to a PDA.
Yeah, I think that's good. I agree. That can be a fairly short item, though, not 15, 20 minutes maybe.
Yeah, I think it could be if you keep it to process, but basically it's a planning process, right? It's a way of getting money to do things like the specific plan, like the downtown plan. I think Paul may have different ideas about how to describe it, but I'd be interested in those two conversations to include at least some preliminary, discussion of, well, what are the big issues in these two different areas, because they're so different. Northgate, we kind of know from the Costco discussion some of the stuff going on up there with when traffic was mentioned earlier. That there's a whole range of things there. And then in the canal, it has a different range of issues. I just think it'd be very interesting to come away from that meeting with, 4 or 5 ideas about what are the issues that this plan is going to have to balance and try to weave together. That gets to be maybe a longer meeting. I don't know.
Bill, I agree. I think that would be very helpful.
I guess because I've always taken the PDA process as a funding mechanism to do planning, and in my opinion, planning is never really a bad thing. And if it's done well, it can be a bad thing, but it by itself it should be a good thing. So it was a mechanism to get funding to do some planning in Northgate. Whatever you're planning, whether you want Costco or you don't want Costco, the idea is to have a community discussion and a planning process to make those decisions. So that's why I don't think it should be that long to talk about that. It's sort of a neutral thing at this point when you haven't started the process. Whereas the downtown plan has structure now, and there's concepts, and there are changes that are not only proposed, they're pretty well fleshed out. And so that's a much more complicated conversation because of the issues involved.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
for
we're
me-
getting beyond ourselves with going into much in the way of issues on the PDAs because as Roger said, that's a PDA is simply a mechanism to get money to do planning. And, you know, if the planning hasn't started, and we know it needs to be done just because of what's going on up there, the fact that there's going to be lots of vacancy and that kind of thing. So we have to plan.
We could have subsequent meetings, talk about our role, our participation in the, you know, like the Northgate PDA process. That way, unlike the downtown plan where we're kind of informing ourselves about it a little late, quite honestly, we could be more in front of it. That wouldn't be a bad thing, but that could be a subsequent meeting. I think understanding the mechanism, understanding the rationale for doing it should, again, without going into some of the specific issues in various neighborhoods right now, which I think should be done at just another meeting. So,
But it's an interesting process because planning is a big deal. Money is a big deal. And the interesting thing about the PDA process is it's a melding of the two. So it deserves, as I say, my notion of how we handle that is if we can really fill Katie in so she understands perfectly well what a PDA is, we've accomplished what we want to do on that item. Whereas with the downtown specific plan, we're down to issues and particulars.
Yes, particulars, exactly.
And what we do want to do is use Paul as much as we can before he's gone. And maybe have whoever is going to be succeeding him at that meeting.
well, you know, Rafi is leaving.
You're right.
Yes, I know.
But I didn't know Paul was
Wow.
leaving.
Yes.
Paul's announced that he wants to retire. It's just a matter of timing it.
Oh, okay.
I think he wants to finish the general plan and between the two of those guys, there's an incredible amount of institutional knowledge that we are
Yeah.
really gonna miss.
Yeah.
You know, just one other point, Bill, on the money part. You know, a question I have actually is to what degree will a PDA set up the pipeline for additional implementation funds after the planning to be available? I think that's supposed to be part of the process, but I can't name an example.
That's my understanding as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, that would be
And,
good. That would
and
be
in
good to know
fact,
about.
to put it crassly, I don't think that the city would even have bothered kind of putting its hat in the ring in the PDA process if there wasn't money at the end of it. I mean,
No, that was the whole
that's-
motivation. They were never dishonest about that. That was completely what it was all
Oh, no,
about.
I'm just thinking that
in any way
I'm saying
inappropriate. I just,
money
it's
for
part of
planning.
understanding the process.
Money for planning, very plain, but money for, you know, hardware implementation later on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That'd be good to know about.
Dirk,
Mark?
you always have pretty good opinions. What should we focus on with regard to the downtown specific plan? What's Dirk's hot issue with regard to the downtown specific plan?
Well, I haven't looked at it lately. You know,
Not how.
Rogers, the hot issue you just mentioned of his is very important because we've got a lot of buildings that could fit the definition of older buildings, and if we're required to keep them all, we're not making any changes downtown. So that's really significant. There's also, I mean, the last time we looked at it, it seemed to me there were a lot of pretty pictures, and it was hard to figure out exactly what was going on. So I think it's important to get to, you know, real words and what they mean, and to the extent possible, I guess, how does form-based planning and that kind of thing fit in with it?
Should we spend a lot of time on form-based planning? We went into it in some depth last time.
Form-based planning comes under the same category as bringing the housing the affordable housing component down to 10%. It's something to try because we think it'll spur change and development. And there's a general agreement that downtown needs to continue to evolve to meet modern needs. I think most people agree with that, but am I saying that out of turn, Bill? And so, you know, so form-based development, I think there is not much dissension on these, on it being a good thing to try. The three other things that I think are important for me, again, there's parking, there's what to do about historic buildings, and what was the third? I think homelessness should be a bigger part of it, even though we won't have solutions. I think it needs to be a component of a plan when it's such a large, has such a large impact on how people feel about downtown, and what its uses are, and that sort of, and how it exists. So those are the three things that I've sort of focused on.
I
And
think
then
for
looking
me,
at, looking at,
As
oh,
involved
sorry.
as I am, or more actually. So he may have a different list.
Mari, I think I interrupted you.
yeah, no, that's okay. I think it's just how Zoom works. I'm definitely interested in diving more into that form-based code. I agree with what Roger said, that I think that we, you know, I think our consensus, although I could be wrong, is that it's definitely a good thing to try. I'm just interested in some of the, I guess, finer points of it. What is being required in terms of retail space to, or commercial space to housing space? Where are some of those zoning things going on? I know like Montecito Plaza is a big, you know, site for development under the plan. What do those codes look like? What are, like, just I think for me, it's like the zoning and what is that actual code going to, you know, get us? What are the buildings going to look like? What's the retail going to be?
One last thing before I turn the agenda over to Simon is I'm really kind of hot on thinking about addressing issues pertaining to the canal in our January meeting. Is there sort of a consensus on that, or
I agree.
are there other issues that anybody thinks should be covered in January?
Very important. We've got to focus. Yes, I think that's critically important.
I think a whole meeting for that is definitely, or, you know, that being the substantive one would be appropriate, because I think it's not something we've covered very well, and for us to understand what are some of the issues that would be appropriate for us to take up down the road and be educated and understand better.
Yeah, I
You know,
think I would really prefer
I'm
some
embarrassed.
education to start off on that. I got a little uncomfortable during some of Joanne's comments. There's a lot of they do this for us. Very, it made me feel uncomfortable. So I want to talk. I would think we need a little bit of education about the community and the history of it, and you know, how to really embrace it and include it in our discussions, because we are the Affordable Housing Committee as well. So.
Yeah, I would echo that. I wrote something down where it was, you know, they are workers, and
she said something
yeah.
that really made me cringe, but yeah. But anyway, so yeah, we need to have a little bit of a more educated dialogue around that.
And I also think voices from that community would be important.
Right.
No, I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember the name of the guy who was a very good member of the CAC who was active in the Canal Alliance. Help me, Bill.
There was a guy named John, what was his last name? A Hispanic last name, who was pretty active in the canal.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah,
20 years ago.
Until Joanne started talking about it tonight, I thought, gee, you know, we sort of used to have kind of an automatic input with regard to issues in the canal, and maybe we've developed a little bit of a blind spot. So enough said, I think, on that. Simon, what else do we have to do before we can wrap up?
Bill, could I add one thing? I want
I'm
to
sorry, go ahead.
To the downtown plan just a bit. Issue for me would be height. Heights are still quite unclear to me what's allowed where, and the height bonuses, and how does that fit into the city's effort to provide greater incentives, particularly for housing and for affordable housing. And I guess the second thing, which was touched on a couple of times, was how will the downtown plan help to bring more housing downtown?
Okay. I think we sort of have a range of ideas that have to be discussed on those two topics.
So I think that discussing all of these things is fantastic. But what is where's the advisory component? That's our name, Citizens Advisory Committee.
Good.
So we can all discuss this amongst ourselves and be educated, more thoroughly ourselves. But at what point do we, provide advice?
Once we're educated, then we will be able to advise.
I agree.
Right, but we jump from topic to topic without providing a lot of advice, it seems to me. I think the letter that we approved earlier in the meeting is fantastic. It was very well written. Kudos to the group that wrote it. We need to keep doing more of that and not just keep the discussion of all of these important issues amongst ourselves. We need to have a work product.
I think.
No, I
yeah.
agree with that, Glenn. And one thing I've always thought is that there sort of has been a reflex in the past, and maybe it's appropriate, that the council sort of tells us what we should be looking into. And I've always thought that we should be more proactive in coming up with issues that are of importance to the population, to the citizens, to tee up for the council.
Joe?
I think we should just narrow the focus and think of one thing we can weigh in on. I think historical preservation is a good one we can make a recommendation on. If we get a little more educated on what has been thought about that maybe we're not aware of in terms of some formula or some guidelines by which these decisions are going to be made, but we could make a recommendation on that, I think. I mean, more than I'd like to know about homelessness too, Roger, but I don't know what we can recommend at this point in the process. So I'm just thinking, if we had to do one thing, what could we make a recommendation on?
I actually wasn't recommending that we have any recommendations on homelessness side, with just a component that was not in the plan,
I know. But as you said, this process is pretty far along at this point, right? So
yeah, I'm not even sure on historic preservation. I don't even know what the current language looks like. Maybe Bill, have you seen the recent?
Well, my understanding was the final review, public review version of the downtown plan was supposed to come out 3 days ago or something. That's what if I'm remembering that right. And if it's not, I haven't seen it, but so it should be coming out soon. So it's moving, to Glenn's point, it's moving into a public, review comment period is where I think we are, which will probably be open for a month or so. So I think we're in a position, if the CAC wanted in December to, write its comments, they're still receiving comments on the plan.
But I think your point is well taken, Glenn, that we ought to make sure we don't devolve into a debating society. We really should make.
Or it's not a committee
make
to
recommendations
educate us
where
about
we
what's
think
going
they're
on.
appropriate.
yeah, at the same time, I think like so early in something, I think it would be helpful to have like an educational presentation on PDAs where we just soak it up. Of course, I don't think anybody would disagree, but just on that topic in particular, I don't think it hurts to have somebody give us like from the basics.
Absolutely. With regard to that issue, we're educating ourselves so that we can really have effective input. We're past the 9 o'clock hour, so unless anybody else has anything else they want to raise at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Simon.
Bill, the only thing that I was going to add is it is that time of year for the annual election of officers. So
Can you just do that?
we did that in February.
This has been a lost year. You just
What?
It's supposed to be the last meeting of the year, and this year will be December. So yes, it is. It does feel quite fast to myself
December's
as well.
last month of the year.
Yeah, December. So we're not going to be doing it tonight. So it's only just a heads up that December we will be selecting our officers. And if you would like to nominate yourself or anyone else, obviously ask the person first. Please let me know. I will include that within the packet for December. And I just want to give a preview. The city clerk is working with the city council on kind of, streamlining a set of guidelines for all boards and commissions. There will be potentially changes in the next year regarding how we select officers. One of them being all CAC members or all members of a board or commission will serve as chair for a term based on seniority. So that will not be in effect by December, but I just want to throw that out there just in case anyone had questions about what that might look like if it does pass.
I think that's a terrible.
Yeah.
So who's next?
Well, we obviously have chair, vice chair, and secretary. So let me know if there's any questions at all, but that's what we'll be discussing at the end of December.
Simon, though, you're saying that this year we're not going to do it by seniority.
No.
So we don't need to worry about it this year.
No.
You have time to retire, Gladys.
Yeah. But
No,
if it does pass,
I don't like that system to start with.
Yeah.
I think
Let's just make sure we allow several days to count the
You might
vote.
like me to retire, but I'm not.
I want it to be known and understood that if I don't get reelected, I'm suing.
That's the way to go.
I think the idea was to have every member experience chair for a term or what have you, and have particular, shifting, just like we do on, different other types of boards and commissions.
Simon, I serve on an awful lot of not-for-profit and civic organizations. My question is, what's the benefit to doing that?
Well, the idea is that every CAC member in this situation would have experience to be a chair for a year.
Is this an educational?
That's really going to help the city.
Yeah.
Do we get a vote? Do we get a vote?
Yeah,
Well,
I agree with Gladys.
this is
Here's
just
an opportunity for us to give recommendations.
Yeah, actually, let's draft a letter.
Yeah.
There we go.
Chairman O'Connell, can you draft a letter for our approval next week next month's meeting?
Yeah, and it'll have a lot of capital letters in it.
Yeah.
Well, you have a certain amount of artistic freedom here, but I mean that is something we should. If there's a proposal by the city manager's office to do something and we don't like it, I mean, what better thing to opine on?
I mean, we need some input on that.
So here's the thing. This is something that may or may not happen.
Well,
I'm some input then.
Right. So what I'm telling you right now is a preview potentially of what the city clerk will be, presenting to us. So it's not like they're bypassing anything. What they're describing to me is this is what they might be doing in the future. The city clerk has the intentions to come to us, so it's not like it's a done deal.
Can we give some informal input before it gets that far?
You're more than welcome to contact, our city clerk. There shouldn't be
Well,
any.
how about, can we write a letter?
we don't want to do it that way. Wait a minute. I would like to see us write a letter. We can address it to the city clerk, say we've heard this is under consideration. Yeah. We just want to preemptively let you know that we think it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons it's a bad idea is that a fairly new person could really never get to be chair. It would always be senior people.
Well, it's not.
Actually, Glenn, I had a different take on that. I think, Glenn, if we started, I'd be all for the seniority thing, assuming that it meant the youngest people serve first.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I like that.
The oldest has to be the secretary.
Can I ask a question though? But don't we have an issue on this board or this committee where everybody's been grandfathered in except for maybe me?
I have not been.
No, nobody's.
We're all reappointed every 4 years.
No, I thought nobody else had term limits.
No, we have term limits.
Everybody
You guys
does.
have all been on this board for like 30 years.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
really?
I've been on the
I
board,
didn't know
I've been on the
that.
board since 1990,
I have.
30 years.
Yeah, so you don't have a term limit.
We
I
have no-
guess not.
No, there, yeah, that's what I thought. The
But-
people who were elected before a certain date are allowed to stay on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I didn't know that. I
I have
didn't know
some
there were term
memory of
limits.
this, which maybe people have lost track of, but this was another change in the governance of the committee that happened, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, where term limits were put in. A lot of us who are on were given an extra term or something.
Right.
I'm pretty sure I'm in my last term now. And so maybe Simon, maybe, or Bill, maybe that we need a review of that, of just where.
I think we
where
do
each
because
of
it
us sits.
doesn't really make sense with the seniority plus the term limits. I mean,
Yeah.
you're right. There's no chance for anybody to do
Well,
anything.
term limit- People were not grandfathered in though with the term limits. They have
No.
one extra term and then they're out.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh,
What is the limit? 2 terms? Or 1?
I think it's 3,
Oh, 3.
2 or 3.
I can ask the city
Okay, so
clerk.
what is everyone on?
Well, I'm not until somebody says I'm not.
I'm on my 7th or 8th term.
Right, but point exactly.
So
Joe, just make sure you put in the minutes, Madeline moves that we get some new blood.
I'm not saying
I
that.
get
I'm just
it.
saying,
No,
I'm
that
just saying-
move
would
that
like
we
to
get
be
old
there.
people
no,
out.
I'm just saying I know what I'm doing Thursday nights for the next 30 years. But
Dirk, you've been on for like 20 some odd years, I believe. Haven't you, Dirk?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not keeping track.
It's been a while.
But I think
I do-
Simon, at the very least, if we don't write a letter, it sounds to me like there's a consensus that we don't think this is a good idea. I mean,
Yeah,
among the people in a committee, they're going to know who they feel comfortable having, lead meetings and things like that.
yeah.
And to just kind of tell, a committee that
this is how you're to do
chair's
it.
going to rotate and it's going to rotate this way.
We
Just
we
doesn't
object to
feel
that.
good.
It kind of treats us like idiots.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what I will say is that there is whoever, and this is like preliminary guidelines. Nothing is set in stone. If you didn't want the senior person to be chair, they could just say no, and you could just move on to whoever wants to be
That's-
chair.
We don't want to be put in that position.
So
No.
I worked up, when I was on the school board, the next person up every 2 years got it. And we'd get a dud, and then we'd get 3 good ones, and then we get another dud, just because it was their turn. You don't want somebody who doesn't really know how to run a meeting or who knows what they're doing, just because he's in a certain place.
Yeah,
I
we've had no problem selecting our chairs and having.
No, we certainly haven't.
Well, I mean,
People have,
in my case, I was chair in the 90s for a few years, and I think I did my part. I mean,
But,
I
the
would-
one thing I would like to say or point out is the notion of seniority governing was the system that allowed the old Confederacy to dominate the US Senate, at least until the early 1960s. And I didn't think that was such a great idea.
yeah,
Well,
Going
I
on.
can
Let's
I can
cite
convey
that.
I can convey the message to the city clerk, and I will solicit any nominations for chair, vice chair, and secretary for December. So
do you think Simon, should we write a letter?
No, I can go ahead and contact her directly.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
got the message.
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
So with those 3 officers up, go ahead and let me know, hopefully before the meeting. I'll just send a reminder with the agenda packet. So you'll probably be getting it the first week of December or.
Who are 3? I mean, it's Bill, and.
who's vice chair right now?
It's Andy.
Oh,
I
Andy is.
thought you were vice chair, Bill.
By the way, anybody who's shy about it, just so you know, I self-nominated, so don't hesitate to nominate yourself if you want any of the 3 offices. I mean that seriously.
Seems like you just
Bill
started
Carney,
yesterday.
how many years were you chair? Like 5? You served for a long time as chair.
Bill Carney, how long were you chair?
Oh, that was a question. To tell you the truth, it was so long I don't remember, but
I think it was 6.
yeah, it wasn't. Okay. At
6
least
years.
yeah.
Joining
And
the-
Glenn,
I'm
you're-
confident
you're-
I can say our committee certainly did not suffer under your leadership.
No, we certainly, I think we've had good chair and we should leave it at picking it the way we do.
I
And
agree.
you could have the same, if they want to, you can obviously still have the same officers too, as long as they nominate themselves.
You
Yeah,
know, the
but
one
somebody
thing that Bill
nominated.
Carney
So
was
you
very
can't
good
do
at
that.
was making sure that we pretty much stayed within our timelines. So
Till tonight,
it's 9:15 and I think it's about time to wrap it up.
I
Unless
sec-
anybody has anything really hot that needs to be talked about.
Nope,
I
thank you.
second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
See you all next month.
See you all next month.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.